This video was made possible by Hover. Buy your domain before it's gone for 10% off at hover.com/HAI. Oh damn, it's one of those weeks. The weeks where Sam is kinda busy, so he writes an aviation-related script for HAI because they're pretty easy and usually do well. Well, the question of the day is this: what's the longest possible commercial flight? By that, I don't mean what's the current longest flight. The answer to that is easy. It's SQ-21, the non-stop Singapore Airlines flight from Singapore to Newark, New Jersey. In just 19 hours, this flight will take you from the best airport in the world to the worst. You see, what I want to figure out is, in some idyllic future without death, illness, Newark Airport, or airplane range restrictions, what would be the longest pair of airports that could feasibly be connected by non-stop commercial flights? To do that, what we have to look for are two airports that are antipodes, diametrically opposite to each other on the globe. Although they're rarer than an on-time flight at Newark, it turns out these do exist. This could be a short episode. Tangier, Morocco's airport is exactly opposite the airport of Whangarei, New Zealand. A flight between these two airports would cross 12,500 miles or 20,000 kilometers over about 22 hours. Case closed. And look at that. We have 4 whole minutes left to talk to you about the sponsor. Except, there's a problem. Whangarei's runway is quite short. Shorter than the average Newark Airport customer service agent's temper. At only 3,600 feet or 1,100 meters long, not even a small regional jet like a CRJ-700 could land there. Only prop planes operate at Whangarei, meaning, unless some wild aircraft designs are in the works, no aircraft that could fly for 22 hours could land there. There are, however, some nearly antipodal airports out there, like Depati Amir Airport in Indonesia and La Macarena Airport in Colombia, or Benito Salas Airport in Colombia, and Sultan Mahmud Babarudin II International Airport in Indonesia. Turns out there are a lot of antipodes between these two countries. Here's the thing though, basically nobody wants to travel between Indonesia and Colombia. It's not that either are bad countries, it's just that, for the average Indonesian, flying 24 hours to Colombia isn't at the top of their bucket list. Realistically, there would never be a non-stop flight between the two countries, no matter the technical abilities of aircraft, because there just wouldn't be the demand. While hypothetically a route between these two nearly antipodal airports could occur, so could Guy Fieri being crowned the next Queen of England. In reality though, neither of these things would practically happen, so to properly answer our question, we need a route with adequate demand to fill big planes. It turns out that passenger airlines need passengers to make money, so figuring out where demand is a hugely important job in the airline industry. If an airline can figure out a new route people want to fly, they're in for a lot of money, so there are loads of data out there on passenger demand. Looking at these data, some of the really obvious super long routes that people fly a lot are from the UK to Australia because, empire. Roughly 2.2 million people fly between the two countries yearly, making it a huge market, but with the exception of one non-stop flight between London and Perth, all of these routes are indirect. More than 500,000 people fly between London and Sydney alone each year, representing 7 Dreamliners worth per day. Qantas intends to start flying this route non-stop once aircraft range allows, however, it's only a measly 10,500 miles or 17,000 kilometers. The two cities are far from antipodal. Surely, we can do better. First of all, don't call me Shirley. Secondly, it turns out we can. For one, there's certainly the demand for a non-stop London to Auckland flight, which, at 11,400 miles or 18,350 kilometers, is not far from antipodal, but a longer city pair is possible if we just look at some less obvious places. This is Brazil. When you think of Brazil, you probably think of all the stuff it's got going for it, like having the Amazon rainforest, having the Christ the Redeemer statue, and not having Newark Airport. What you probably don't think of, though, is Brazil being home to a lot of Asians. But, as it turns out, there are an estimated 3 million people in the country with primarily Asian ancestry. Of those, about half are Japanese. Therefore, there's demand for about 57,000 seats a year between Tokyo Narita Airport and Sao Paulo, which would be plenty enough to keep a flight afloat, even though 11,490 miles or 18,490 kilometers separate the airports. Such a flight is not technically possible right now, but if it were, it would take nearly 21 hours in the air. Only a few hundred miles away from perfectly antipodal, surely this is the longest possible route out there. But we can do ever so slightly better. You see, in addition to all the Japanese in Brazil, there's a sizable, albeit smaller diaspora of Chinese. Roughly 200,000 people of Chinese ancestry live in Sao Paulo alone, which leads to a similar annual flight demand to Shanghai of 53,000 passengers, presumably propped up by strong tourism demand as well. This route, just 26 miles or 42 kilometers longer, could reasonably exist when aircraft with that kind of range are developed. Despite all this rather strong demand between Asia and South America, there are, in fact, no nonstop flights between the two continents. While some points on the two continents are close enough for a flight, overall, there just isn't the demand, and that makes South America and Asia the only two inhabited continents on Earth to not be connected by nonstop flights. Nonetheless, the demand could be there for nonstop flights in the future, and so we're going to call this the longest possible nonstop flight in the world. Until some YouTube commenter tells me why I'm wrong. What you could also use to tell me why I'm wrong is my custom email set up through Hover, spam@halfasinteresting.com. I set that up so I look professional rather than using a boring, generic email like halfasinterestingspam@gmail.com. Having this email only costs $20 a year, which I consider well worth it so that, when you send me things that I'll never read, you're given the best impression. You too can look cool for the email users at school, work, or elsewhere by getting one of these custom emails in addition to custom domains for your site at Hover. The key is, though, to get your domain as soon as possible since domains disappear by the day. When you do buy your email or domain, be sure to do so at hover.com/HAI so that you get 10% off, and that'll also help support HAI.